this used to be my car. I would say that was well over 10 years ago, it seems like. And I sold it to not only what was to be a good friend, but a very relevant power into the starting of Vintage Customs. And so anyway, the car's back here now to take care of some of its rust issues, which are very minor in this car compared to the other cars we get in. Got a little bit of issues here, and the leading edges of the floor. Normally we like to take out the entire floor, but when almost 80% of this floor is in really good shape, it's hard for me to justify doing that. So we're going to remove and replace only what's needed. And over the preceding few weeks, we'll show you what that's all about. But we're coming here today because what I'm trying to do is we're eventually just going to paint this area, but I'm doing minimum exposure because the leading edge area right here where the rocker terminates in the front of the wheel, this is kind of chewy and it's gotten pretty bad over the last, well, we'll just say last 10 years. Anyway, so it's time to address it. So I'm going to try to do a minimal opening for the proper repair, and we are going to fabricate some of these pieces because there's no point in me cutting up an entire, rocker repair panel for no more than what I'm going to try to maintain here. But anyway, so it's a 72 GTV. By all accounts and purposes, was always in really good shape. And it's nice to see it back, but I painted this thing, I think, close to 10 years ago. Alright, so effectively, the minute we cut loose that bottom, the whole fender becomes very loose. So we're just going to replicate this and clean all this up and preserve it so it's never an issue again. We'll inject some cavity wax in there to preserve the metal. By putting cavity wax on, you're keeping oxygen away from the surface. Rust cannot exist without oxygen. But in this case, he's very, very lucky because there's really not much more damage than that. Alright, so we've gotten to the very bottom of the metal where it's now solid, and it's only that the middle rocker needs a little repair here, and then we just need to replicate the outer rocker, and then we'll put the jack point back on. Once we put the jack point back on, then the floor sections can be put in. Again, this is a fairly unique situation, because usually when you see rust starting to break away over here, that's generally a good telling sign that there's going to be some significant collateral damage within the rocker system, but in this case not so much. It's fairly sound. And that's really good news. Okay, so we sprayed weld-through primer. Weld-through primer is this copper color stuff, and what this does is it allows us to weld without it burning the primer away, thus protecting the metal. Anyway, so we reconstructed everything down here that needed to be addressed, and now we've made the drop-in piece supposed to go right here. So all this will be welded in and tacked back into place, and that way we're minimalizing how much of a repair we have to make. If you're going to do this kind of thing, you should probably try to think all the way through it. It's not exactly a difficult job, assuming you have the tooling to do so, but if you have to replicate parts like this, make sure you get weld-through primer. That way, when you're welding, you're not burning off the primer and exposing the metal for new rust on a later date. Between that and then what you use on the exterior to protect this metal for the rest of its life, those things you should probably do a little bit of research on and make sure you know exactly what it is you're using, because a lot of rattle can style primers are not really worthy for long-term use on a car. Just food for thought. realize I'm trivializing this to a degree, making it sound a whole lot simpler than it probably really is. I guess the bigger exercise I'm trying to display is very achievable with a little bit of forethought. What I'm about to do is I'm about to commit the bottom of this. By doing that, having it freed, I'm able to set the gap here, which is critical before I weld this. Now that everything is aligned, you have to keep in mind everything has been copper weld through primer on the internals of this to preserve all this metal. So right now I'm using a spoon and hammer to shape the bottom of this radius so it's tight against this rocker so it looks proper. Pretty good, it's time to weld. Okay, so this weld's still a little bit proud. So just as a little fine tuning before we call it done, I'm going to use my adjustable contour file. And we're going to cut some of this so it's relatively flat and follows the style lines of the car. I could use just an angle grinder with a sanding disc on it. The thing of it is, that's pretty aggressive and it cuts really, really quick. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to control how much I remove, because the thinner you make a weld, the more probability it is to crack. Okay, now that metal's fabricated and everything's completed on this, I'm not technically done. Now what we need to do is we need to protect all this new metal. So we're going to put a layer of acid etch primer on this, and we're going to let that flash off. The minute you put something over acid etch, whether it's primer or body fillers or what have you, it suspends. In other words, it stops etching into the metal. So we're going to put acid etch on there. We're going to let it work its job for a couple of days before we go any further with this. But that's about it. Okay, so now we're turning the corner on our step nose race car, which is, by all purposes, it was set up for a mechanical style clutch assembly. However, we are upgrading it to a degree. We're putting in the exceptionally rare floor pedal hydraulic assembly. The real difference between these two is that you have to make some modifications to the chassis, but what's weird is some of these chassis already had the provision in place for this to happen, although we didn't see this style assembly in the States until '69. These are fairly hard to come by. And what makes this different is if you look right here, this goes through the sub-chassis down below on the rail underneath the floor pan. And what this does is this links back to a rod that connects to a master cylinder, which is a little bit further back in the chassis. This allows us to run a hydraulic clutch assembly, which means we get to run a 2-liter style bell housing. You know, there's lots of benefits of running a 2-liter style assembly. Now, however, in the earlier series cars, which these are plentiful, they're everywhere, the These are very hard to come by, but the early floor pedal, not so hard to come by at all. Because this was on every 105 pre-69 available, whether it was a GT, Spider, or Super, it didn't matter. This is what you had in the floor assembly. So anyway, we're making the provision for this car to run a hydraulic clutch. It's all because of this. These are really hard to come by, and those who have them are very hard pressed to let go of them. So if you were ever to make the accommodations to convert your car to a hydraulic clutch and you wanted to maintain that vintage look, chase down a 69 pedal assembly. And it's imperative you get the rod and the master framing with this, because this by itself doesn't do you any good. You still need all the mechanicals, or the hydraulics I should say, to go with it. Okay, so our 69 hydraulic pedal assembly would go in through the floor just like everything else, and all this bolts right up just like the original, pre-69 assembly. However, this right here, we've reinforced it. This is our heavy-duty plating system we put in a long time ago, but we always make sure that we make the accommodations for the floor assembly if we were ever to go to hydraulic. Excuse the noise. If you're lucky enough to find one of these 69 pedal boxes that you want to adapt it to your car, nothing wrong with that idea, it's a good idea. However, things to be known about these. The brass sleevings inside this, check it out, make sure that it is not worn and that it's in good shape. As tough as this was to get out, I'm pretty sure this is in good shape. The other thing you need to do with these 69 pedal boxes is this rod is pounded onto here, it's not welded onto here. What you want to do is you're going to weld this to here, and it is critical to the location of the pin. Pin is flat spotted, so you have only one way this thing's going to orientate. So this one's never moved, although you can see there's movement in the pin. So I'm going to take this opportunity. First of all, we'll clean all this up. I'm going to take this opportunity to weld this to this, because however, this is a race car, so it's going to take above normal abuse. So things like this really need to be in good shape. Okay, so these are the control rods. We've got two of them for a hydraulic clutch pedal. Now here's the thing, we're not trying to change the thickness of this rod, I'm just polishing the surface, because what we've done is we've cleaned it all, and we've cleaned the actual pedal assembly itself. So the brass sleeves that are inside that pedal assembly look really good, so we're not worried about that. But at the same time, you can't very well put a rod back in that has corrosion on, so we're just going to clean it up a little bit with some aluminum oxide sanding tape, just to kind of polish the surface only. And then we're going to lubricate everything and put it all back together. That's it. I'll put the other one on. That's it. This one needs a little more attention than the other one did. Now, obviously, you don't need a fancy lathe to do this. You can do this by hand. We're just trying to get it done in a hurry. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to weld this up. This thing's ready for reassembly, put it in the car. Okay, so the last thing we gotta do before we put this pedal assembly in is gonna have to put in a steel sleeve where it goes through the chassis here. If you don't, it is very probable things around here can start collapsing. Even though we have our reinforcement plates on the chassis rail, it's still just a good idea to have this sleeved in. Now, one of the things you should probably know, when it comes to reinforcement plates, ones that we make, what we do is we cut out a bunch of holes in them as to get more surface area to weld. If you don't have a bunch of holes in it, you're only going to weld the perimeter. You're not really reinforcing the chassis, you're just reinforcing the perimeter around it. So that's the whole point why we do all these cutouts, so we can gather up much more surface metal to make that entire joint much stronger. So next, we're going to create a sleeve that goes in here, weld it in place. We're done. Alright, there's our steel sleeving. I'm about to weld this in, and this is going to give us the clearance for our clutch assembly to come out over here where it's mounted at.
And we'll both ride home in my automobile.